It's my great pleasure to introduce to you someone who I have come to know and respect as an international advocate for human rights, a no-nonsense leader who really knows how to get things done, and a true humanitarian with a very, very big heart. Please welcome to the stage the University of Minnesota's Dean of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, Eric Schwartz.
Thank you, Laura, for your very generous introduction. I also want to welcome you all here today to the University of Minnesota for this very important event. And I think it's fitting that the University of Minnesota's and the Humphrey Schools, in collaboration with other schools, other units at the university, the Center for Integrative Leadership is a sponsor and host of Freedom Here and Now, Ending Modern Slavery. Because I know if we are to end the tragedy of human trafficking in our lifetime, it will require a concerted, multi-sector effort. The sort of cross-boundary leadership approach that is the focus of the Center for Integrative Leadership. Whether it's through improved public policy and law enforcement efforts, whether it's changed business practices, increased taxpayer advocacy, or simply expanded awareness of the problem, we all must be engaged in eradicating modern slavery. Today, you will hear from leaders in business and industry, in law enforcement and public policy, who have taken concrete and powerful steps toward reducing and, in some cases, eradicating human trafficking. As a member of the White House National Security Staff focusing on humanitarian issues during the 1990s and 2000, I was very proud to play a role in the development of initiatives that were included in the landmark Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. And until last fall, as Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration, I witnessed the devastating impact that trafficking can have on individuals, on families, and on entire communities. This is a modern-day tragedy that we can and that we must end in our lifetime. And during my tenure at the State Department, it was my distinct honor and privilege to work closely and collaboratively with our honored guest today, Ambassador Louis C. DeBaca, on a broad range of initiatives on policies and programs to protect, to support, and to empower people vulnerable to the scourge of human trafficking. And of course, our focus on this issue doesn't end today. Laura has already mentioned a range of important measures that we and you all can and will be taking. But we also recognize our responsibility to use every opportunity, every chance, to put a spotlight on this issue and to mobilize broad support within our communities. So with that goal very much in mind, the Humphrey School, with the generous support of the Carlson and Carlson Family Foundation, will host a Distinguished Carlson Lecture this fall featuring New York Times columnist Nick Kristof, who has written extensively about this issue of human trafficking and the exploitation of women and girls.
Recognizing that social change requires many actors, we are working with companies like ExxonMobil, Coca-Cola, Manpower, whom you'll hear from later, Microsoft, LexisNexis, Delta, The Body Shop, to launch the Business Coalition Against Trafficking, which will serve as a resource for other businesses that wish to educate their employees and to ensure that their supply chain is free of forced labor. The Business Coalition is also partnering with governments and NGOs to combat the problem. So at the global and federal level, awareness and action continues to build. But you know, in our own community, we're not there yet. You probably will be shocked, just as I was, to learn that the FBI ranks Minneapolis number 2 in its list of the top 13 cities in the nation for the sex trafficking of children. We cannot allow this to stand. In a state that consistently ranks among the leaders on every list pertaining to quality of life issues, this is entirely inconsistent with our values. I know there are many parents in our own community, particularly in the suburban areas, who resist thinking that this can happen to anyone's daughter, including upscale, upset teenage girls who leave their homes in anger and head for the mall. But it's these girls in Minnesota and in every state who become the prime targets for the traffickers, who recognize the signs of discontent and who are expert at exposing and posing as a great boyfriend catch or offering an enticing opportunity. On average, it takes just 16 hours for a girl to become entrapped in the sex trade. But here's the good news. In Minnesota, we have been shocked into action and are determined to make our state a model for the nation in the fight to prevent the sexual trafficking of children. Carlson is a co-sponsor of a local initiative recently launched by the Women's Foundation, Minnesota Women's Foundation. And you're going to be hearing more about Minnesota Girls Are Not for Sale later in this program. This focuses on public education, on lobbying for policies to prevent girls from exploitation, and distributing grants to build the infrastructure we need across the state to provide services to teen victims. Just last year, thanks to enlightened citizens, we passed safe harbor legislation in Minnesota. We are only the 5th state to do so. This legislation ensures that minors who are prostituted are not put through the criminal justice system, but rather availed of victim services to assist with rehabilitation. I've lived nearly my entire life in this community that I cherish and in this country that I love. I'm deeply appreciative of the quality of life that we all enjoy. But it's become so clear to me that quality of life that a society enjoys, quality of life that values human dignity, are not inherited, at least not for very long. They must be renewed by every generation, or they will gradually slip away. Now it's our turn to dedicate ourselves to ensuring that our communities are healthy and safe places to raise all of our children. All across this country, on college campuses, students are coming together to take on this issue. I urge you to do the same.
When we think about what government can do, what businesses can do, the cultural shift that is necessary, I think we also need to think about why we do this. 150 years ago, this September, a promise was made by this country, a promise that slavery would no longer be legal, no longer be approved. The Emancipation Proclamation was not just words on paper. Those who heard it read out loud by the U.S. cavalrymen who would ride up to their plantations, they didn't wait 4 months for it to kick in on January 1st. They didn't wait 2 more years for the 13th Amendment to be promulgated and make it legal. They heard the promise and they took their freedom. Frederick Douglass said, "I prayed for 20 years for my freedom, and my prayers were never answered until I prayed with my legs." The fight against slavery, the fight against trafficking in persons, and the fight for women's rights are the same fight. Human rights and women's rights cannot be separated. So that's why I'm so proud to be here today with the sponsors that bring us together, the Women's Foundation and others, but also thinking about this guarantee that you're coming together to make, that Minnesota girls are not for sale.